Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the May meeting of the network. We really appreciate you supporting us today. We started the network about almost 2 years ago, and the 5 spokes of the wheel, kind of the larger groups that we were trying to reach, were entrepreneurs, established industry, our own research, and economic development were the first 4. The 5th one was growers. And when I looked at some of the topics that we had over those first several meetings, we really didn't have one that laser focused on growers and something that was really specifically dedicated to agribusiness. Well, we're changing that this month in a big way. I want to look at and have you look as well at the opportunities that we still have in agribusiness and how they've changed. So please join me in welcoming our presenter today, Fred Wydner, Director of Agricultural Development in Pittsylvania County.
Thank you, Chris. Well, I've seen quite a few of you before, and I know quite a few of you. There's some new faces out there, but please, by all means, continue to enjoy your lunch. And while you're doing so, just remember the fact that everything I'm going to be talking about, probably a farmer had to touch. So what's on your plate, a farmer had to touch too. So make sure when you get a chance to thank a farmer when you see them as well. For those of you who were at the meeting with Todd Haymore up at the complex for the chamber breakfast, you'll see a lot of the same slides. But in conversating with Chris, I've added several slides in there to talk about some more of our agribusiness opportunities that are in the area that we might not be as familiar with, and then some of the financing options that are out there too, which are pretty interesting. That we have such a important agribusiness structure that there are a lot of institutions out there willing to support that structure also. So you don't find that in a lot of places around the country. I know that firsthand from experiences. I've lived in, Virginia, Ohio, Carolina, and a lot of places in between there. So I've got quite a bit of experience with that aspect of it. But again, thank you for being here. Thank you for being willing to listen a little bit to what we've got to talk about with agribusiness. 5 years ago, when basically I was brand spanking new to this position, I started in December 2007, and the first day on the job, I didn't even have a chair in my office. I had a telephone, and that's about it. So I was scrounging around on that first day to find a chair. The second day, I spent the very second day working on the business plan for the Old Dominion Ag Complex, which I know most of you have heard of and have visited with us up there for different events. So that was my second day. So that was kind of busy. Well, the third day, I spent the third day trying to figure out, okay, which direction do I want to go? Because this is an open book, an open slate. And so I figured, well, in order to do that, I really need to understand the economy that we have here right now. What is our agribusiness? What does it entail? What's involved? How does it impact our rural structure, our infrastructure, and our economic basis? So over the last 5 years, literally, I've been thinking about this, trying to figure out how to research the numbers that I would need and which research institutions would help me. So finally, with some support from the Danville Regional Foundation, we were able to initiate the study of July of 2012 last year, and then it was continuously researched with data gathering and different focus groups for over the next 8 months from July on. And then, at the bottom there, one of the things that was extremely important to me was that I wanted this study to focus on all forms of agriculture. When we drive up and down the road, we see agriculture. We know what it is. We see tobacco growing in the fields. We see trees growing in different plots. We see cattle grazing. We know that there are dairies out there. And this, to most people, is what agriculture is. But there are so many other small nuances that a lot of people don't even consider, And I wanted to incorporate some of those as well, such as our CSAs, our Community Supported Agricultures. You don't see those, but they're there. You know, when you see agritourism opportunities, right now within the county there's a gentleman who every fall for his little fall festival creates a gigantic, and I do mean gigantic, fort made out of hay bales. And, you know, you don't see these things until you get off the road and travel out there, but all of that's included in this study. So basically, you know, there were three main reasons why I wanted to do the study. One was to help market the county. I wanted to be able to tell everybody, hey, look, Pittsylvania County is in the business to do agriculture, and we want your business here to support our agriculture, and we want to support you. The second thing that I wanted to achieve with this study was to look at different grant sources that are out there. You know, we're sitting in a wonderful area right now that is incorporated within the tobacco region. And so, you know, the Tobacco Commission has been a huge help throughout the area. We have local grant organizations that help us out too, such as the Danville Regional Foundation, the Community Foundation, the J.T. Emerson Trust, things like that. But then on a statewide basis, I've been able to work with our state partners up at the Office of VDACs to help develop things like the APHID grant, which I'll talk about a little bit later on. And then the last thing that I had in my mind that I wanted this study to help tell us was to, well, actually, what I wanted the study to help me was to actually form policy. You know, the county right now has a very, very good policies on zoning. They have lots of different ordinances and whatnot. But I wanted to use this study to help me convince the Board of Supervisors that, hey, look, agriculture is important, and we don't need to let it go on the back burner. We don't need to let our number one industry, as we'll see a little bit later on, we don't need to let our number one industry flounder because we don't have the resources through code compliance that we need to help support it. So that was the third reason. All right, as far as the different aspects of the study, it's how it's broken down. Basically, the study gives a quick description of the area. It gives a description of the different ag and forestry trends, followed by the actual economic impact data. This is what everybody wants to see. You know, what are the numbers? We actually broke out into small little focus groups, one of which was held here. And then we had two other focus groups out in the county as well to get some community feedback. What do our constituents here, what do they feel is important to our agricultural structure that we have going on here? And then last, within the study itself, we took all of this information and we developed some strategic initiatives that I can use through the Ag Development Board to help propel our infrastructure of agriculture here. And for those that are curious and want to see a copy of the study or print it out for yourself, here's the, I'll go back here. Very sensitive. Down there at the bottom, the website is the coopercenter.org/econ. And the very first study that you get to on that web page will be the study for the region. And Dr. Rappan and his team at the Weldon Cooper Center did an excellent job of, one, working with me, but two, organizing the material and researching the data necessary to put together this study. So moving forward, I'm going to look at some of the trends and transformations of the area because I think it's important to understand some of the background as to where these numbers are coming from. First of all, we want to look at what's happened over a series of years from 1969 through 2011 with our employment numbers and then our cash receipts for farm goods. If you'll notice, the red line is trending downward, hopefully to level off here in the next few years, but that represents employment numbers on the farm. This is pretty easily explained in the fact that, we've got an aging generation of farmers out there. And with that aging generation of farmers, a lot of them are saying, you know what, I'm too old to continue on, so I'm going to, either limit my responsibilities on the farm, or I'm going to basically lease out my farm or rent it out to somebody else. So when he does that, he takes his employment. Let's say he was a tobacco farmer. He says, okay, I don't need my employees anymore. So therefore, you have that kind of a downward trend in employment. However, at the same time, you have with the blue line an increase in cash receipts. Simple explanation here is supply and demand. Every day in this world, there are more and more people being born. However, there's not as much land to grow crops on. So as more people grow, they need to be fed. So therefore, you have a supply and demand counterbalance, which is saying that, okay, we're going to increase our receipts a little bit because we need more crops. We need more crops in the ground, and we need to feed all these additional people that are in the world. Well, traditionally, tobacco was and still is our number one row crop out there right now. But as you can tell, it's had a very cyclical up and down pattern since the 1930s with an overall downward trend. Well, basically, if you look at 2004 right there with the lowest point of that entire graph, I explained this previously at the chamber meeting. That is when the federal government started the buyout program. And when they did that, a lot of the farmers decided that, okay, you know what, it's a good time to retire. As a matter of fact, my father-in-law was one of those people. They said, I'm going to get out of the business. I don't need to continue with the tobacco farming. I'm happy with where I am in life, so therefore I'm going to get out. So that instantaneously resulted in a big drop in our tobacco production. However, in years since then, there's been kind of a stabling off effect, and thanks to investments like JTI here in the area, it's actually been pretty positive for our tobacco production, and that trend line is, as you can tell, starting to tail off. And I anticipate within the next several years, and maybe as soon as this next ag stats that's going to come out, you might actually start seeing a little uptick in the tobacco production. But even though that there is that stagnated line towards from 2007 to 10 and an overall downward trend, Pittsylvania County is still the number one producer of tobacco in the state. Our single county right here is 9th in production in the entire United States, and then we're 15th in the country for the value of our tobacco products here. So when I tell you that Pittsylvania County has a major impact on the ability of our tobacco companies around this region to be profitable, that's no lie. I mean, when you look at those numbers right there, it's Pittsylvania County is extremely important. Let's look at something that a lot of people kind of overlook, and not that they ignore it, but it's just overlooked, and that's our timber industry. One of the things that we look at within the timber industry is stumpage values. And stumpage basically refers to how much the landowner themselves are receiving for their product, their wood product. Prime example, my bride and myself, we are actually getting ready to start a timber harvest, which would include a clear cut and some thinning on about 86 acres of our farm, one of our farms. And within that, I have been working through different timber companies to receive contract pricing. Well, you can see on the graph here, the illustration, that timber prices are coming back up. And I can tell you for, about a year and a half ago, when I started the process of the contract bids to today, they're definitely in an upswing. And that's good for our families out there who are relying on some timber resources that are out there. I kind of explained it to everybody at the chamber meeting. You'll notice a lot of these, up and downs, but if you look at what happened in 2003, you have a steady but pretty significant increase in timber values. The economy was good. People were building homes left and right. Mortgage rates seemed to be decent at that time, and man, we needed a glut of wood in the marketplace right now to build those homes. Well, it kind of stagnated a little bit, and the neat thing about this is our industry, the ag industry, knows when some of these drop-offs are going to occur before the media does, because we see a pullback in people buying lumber, we see grain prices starting to tail off, we see all that stuff. And so then you have that kind of a stagnation there at the top, then all of a sudden, boom, the bubble burst on the housing market, as we all have seen and lived through and whatnot. And man, those prices fell through the bottom, fell through the floor. And so basically they bottomed out in 09 and 010, which they're starting to rebound now, which is a good thing. And I'm hearing from a lot of our timber consultants out there that for the next year to 2 years, these prices are going to be on a steady swing upwards. So if you yourself, or if you know anybody who has some timber, now would be a good time to look at possibly entering into a timber contract. Well, as far as the trends are concerned, we've gone over those. I want to look at now the actual numbers and how those numbers were developed. Again, this is a very busy slide, basically telling you that we used an input-output model to come up with the figures that I'm going to share with you here in the next slide or two. And to basically calculate the numbers that we received, we used a industry-recognized program called M-Plan. And basically, it's Impact Analysis for Planning. That's basically what it stands for. Because I'm of a very simple mind and I don't quite understand a lot of these things, I asked the researchers to help me out with what I call the direct, indirect, induced effect conundrum. Basically, these are three aspects of economic division, if you will, that goes into coming up with the entire economic effect. So I'm going to take something that I understand that I hope most of you in here kind of has some sort of a feeling for, and that's tobacco farming. I'm going to use that as an example. So let's say myself as a tobacco farmer, I go out there and I have a contract and I sell my tobacco to JTI. That in and of itself produces money that I can use in my pocket for things that I need to support my household. That is considered a direct effect, okay? Well, before I even had any tobacco to sell, guess what? I had to purchase my seeds, I had to purchase fertilizer, I had to organize insurance, I had tractor payments, tractor parts, I had all these things that I had to put into my farming operation before I actually harvested that crop. That's considered an indirect effect. Well, then, when I got into the season, I have all my labor that I have to take care of. My guys are out there in the field, they're working hard for me. And when they get a little bit of money in their hands, they like to go to the store, they like to buy, some groceries, they like to pay for cars, they like to cell phones, they like to, have a nice home, things like that. So they are spending money in this economy too. But it's all based off of this sale of tobacco there. And that's known as an induced effect. Well, all three of these together formulate our total economic impact. So, just to get that, just to help everybody out, when you see these economic impact analysis, that basically is what goes into the numbers that you'll see here. So in terms of numbers, within the Danville, Pittsylvania County area, our rural agricultural landscape provides, supports nearly 7,300 jobs in this area. I think for myself that's a pretty big number, but in terms of total sales, you're looking at $1.2 billion that agriculture provides back to this area. And that's just off of one county and one city. And, Todd, Secretary Haymore spoke to the fact that, agriculture is also the state's #1 industry. Well, it's because of rural counties like Pittsylvania County that want to focus and emphasize their rural landscape, their rural legacy, their rural heritage in agriculture, to support it, to have numbers like this. So I'm very happy with those numbers, and I knew that they would be large. I just didn't know that they would actually be that large. Now, one of the things that I was specifically kind of wanted to direct the research to was towards, what type of tax base is agriculture giving us? Because at the end of the day, we've all got to pay our taxes, but I wanted to know, that our farmers had a say when they stood up before the Board of Supervisors or when they stood up before the City Council and say, hey, look, I'm important. I want you to listen to some of my needs too. Even though we're a small delegation, we have a large impact on the county and the county revenues. And this is what we came up with. With local tax revenue, agribusiness provides $15.3 million to our industry. On the state side, it's nearly the same as that, 15.1, with a total impact of $30.3 million between the two. So I think that's pretty strong. It gives our farmers the ability to stand up pretty confidently in a Board of Supervisor meeting and say, hey, look, I understand where you're going with a certain piece of legislation. However, let me tell you how it's going to affect me and my industry. And that's part of the reason why the Ag Development Board exists today, is so that we can do some of these things. But these are extremely strong numbers as far as our agribusiness is concerned. Some interesting takeaways on the economic side: for every $1 in local ag sales, $1.26 is turned back into the economy. And here's something to consider too: for every 10 jobs that are created in an agribusiness, there are 4 more created elsewhere in the economy, whether that's in banking, insurance, retail sales, whatever it may be. So that's important to note as well. We've already mentioned the fact ag supports 7,300 jobs, $1.2 billion industry, and a $15.3 million to our tax base a year. So now we move into the area that helped me develop some of these strategic initiatives to help make sure that ag was at the forefront whenever we went before the Board of Supervisors and things like that. Right now, there's a separate committee that the Board of Supervisors has organized known as the Purchase of Development Rights Committee. Basically, their number one goal is to look at formulating an ordinance or a program within the county that helps preserve farmland. We've already shown the importance of farmland. The use of the aphid grant. Right now, I am working with an industry that's looking to move to the area, if you will, and to develop here. And we're trying to use the aphid grant. Again, this is a grant developed by the state, by VDACs, and supported by the Secretary of Agriculture to help promote Virginia agribusiness. I'm looking at some congressional correspondence regarding key ag issues. As a matter of fact, last Friday, I worked with Katie Frazier with the Virginia Agribusiness Council. I serve on that council as a board of director. But together, she and I put together a meeting with Senator Mark Warner, who came down from D.C. to Richmond to the Farm Bureau office. And what we did was we had a bunch of different farmers from around the region come and talk to the senator about immigration reform. We've all seen it on the news right now. It's a big, hot topic. And while a lot of the farming industry is not opposed to immigration reform, in fact, we're looking for immigration reform, there are certain things that we want to make sure that the senator and our congressmen understand, that needs to be in a comprehensive bill that actually supports instead of hinders agriculture. And right now there are some issues that need to be addressed. And he did take his time to come down and meet with us. And that was a very, very productive meeting, both for him and his staff and for our farmers as well. Domestic marketing missions. 3 weeks ago, I just took a group of farmers out west to visit a bunch of feedlots out in Kansas, Oklahoma, and Texas. I also took them to a large beef processing plant, and we went out there to a large purebred Angus farm. most of our farmers around here are known as cow-calf operators. They have a bunch of cows in the field, they have a bull, and the cow gives them calves every year. You know, the cow has a calf every year, and they just take that calf and they sell that calf at Lynchburg. It's easy to do. Nobody had, you know, it's easy in, easy out. Those calves will typically end up somewhere on the East Coast. You know, maybe up in Pennsylvania, maybe up in Maryland somewhere. Well, there's one processing plant on the East Coast, and that's in Pennsylvania. It's known as Moyer Packing or JBS Swift. My biggest concern looking at our cow-calf producers from a 30,000-foot level is what's going to happen to those cattle if JBS decides that they're not going to be around anymore. So we have this, you know, we have this concern. Right now, nobody in the cow-calf area is concerned about it. But me, looking out in my position for those individuals, I am concerned about it. And so that's why I wanted to develop these relationships with these feedlots and packers out west so that I make sure that our cow-calf guys have a place to market their calves. So that's a big initiative that we're working on. And then, you know, one of the last things on this slide is the promotion of specialty and diversified ag industries. Chris has asked me to talk a little bit about some of the new ventures, and this goes back to that last slide, but I'm pretty excited with a lot of these things, and some of you might have a hard time getting up with me if you call me and need to talk to me. But these are a lot of the reasons why, because I stay busy so much. We've got people interested in shiitake mushrooms. We've got people looking at commercial blueberry operations. Aquaculture is becoming big. You know, we've got the prawns that are here already. Several individuals are doing that. You might have heard of the not the freshwater fish, but the shrimp fest that the Chamber's doing. They're going to try to highlight some of the local prawn there. And then there's a group that's trying to raise hybrid striped bass right here in the county. Hops, you know, the specialty vineyards and the specialty breweries, you know, they're in vogue right now. Well, you know, we've got some individuals right here in the county who are trying to jump on that bandwagon, and believe it or not, this good old Virginia red clay is pretty good at producing hops too, not just tobacco. So, you know, we've got an opportunity there. Mead. Mead is basically honey wine. I don't know if you've ever heard of that before, but it's obviously extremely sweet because it's made out of honey. But the honey industry in the area, believe it or not, is growing. And we have literally the nation's oldest beekeeping supply store right here in the county. It's called Dadant & Sons, and they're located in Pite Squeeze. So, you know, we've got a lot of history there on the honey side and apiaries. Had a call the other day from a gentleman who wanted to know how to get into custom rabbit processing. Believe it or not, there's a lot of people who are interested in rabbit meat other than to feed to their pet snake. But, you know, there's people out there that actually enjoy eating domesticated rabbit. Myself, I like them wild. It just gives them a little bit more of a flavor. Custom poultry processing, and that actually is coming from a neat opportunity that's coming to the county. I've been working closely with some of our realtors in the area to entice and encourage a large Amish community to come to the area. So we've attracted about a dozen or so families from the North Carolina region, and throughout the county they've purchased about 1,000 acres already here. So, and they are very, very good agriculturalists and great neighbors too. And one of the families wants to do a custom poultry processing facility here. Community-supported agriculture. Talked about this before. That's becoming a big thing. If you're interested, I'll be glad to talk to you about some of the CSAs in the area, but they do a very good job of it. Promotion of the Lady Aster Rose. Again, this gets into different plant propagations that are being basically propagated right here in the area, and so, you know, those are important. And then the bioenergy sector. We got Dairy Energy Inc., the state's first methane digester. We've got Verdia, which is right here on campus with the Institute, and then Piedmont Bioproducts. So The last one on here is something interesting, pier poles. You might be wondering what I'm talking about. Yes, I'm talking about piers like at Virginia Beach, like you would see. I mentioned the fact that we are right here in a big area for timber production. We have a specialty sawmill here in the county that is producing very large, very expensive pier poles. And when you see a lot of these hurricanes that go up and down the coast, they tear up more than houses. They tear up all of their piers and things like that. So they need access to a lot of these pier poles. So that in and of itself for this one manufacturer is netting him well over $1 million worth of sales per year. And we're talking about, gigantic 12 by 12 by, sometimes 36 feet long poles. And that takes a massive tree, I mean to tell you. So, a lot of those are being harvested right now for these piers. The other thing Chris and I talked about was, with all these new ventures, how are they being funded? And there are several opportunities out there, and which is good, as I mentioned earlier. The staple for the farming industry has and always will be farm credit. They will work with an individual, whether they're young or old, to help with their financing needs for any kind of farming necessity that they may have, whether it's operating funds, capital funds, you name it. Farm credit's out there, and they're very active. One that my wife and I have actually utilized is the USDA Farm Lending Program. That in and of itself is a very good program for those who are younger farmers trying to get into farming. That program is right there. That can be accessed right there at the Ag Complex through the FSA office. There's government cost share programs. A lot of our farmers take part in that. And believe it or not, commercial banks. We think about these BB&Ts and American Nationals and the First Citizens banks of the world, and we think, well, they're just for, personal financing and business financing. Well, I'm here to tell you, and this is no secret, the complex up there, you would think would have been financed through farm credit, was actually financed through First Citizens Bank. They have actually a very big hold down in North Carolina on a lot of the poultry houses that are going in down there. So we don't want to forget the commercial banks. Always there's private capital that people are accessing. I've mentioned some of the grants that are out there, different partnerships, whether you're going in partnership with somebody else, a family member, whatever that may be. And then an interesting one that's down there that I have listed last as the launch place. Those of you that know Ava Doss, she has developed the launch place here, and while I have not talked to her specifically about ag programs, Varun has assured me that if there's an interesting business model out there, if it incorporates agriculture, they're more than willing to sit down and talk about helping out with some capital. So to wrap up, my last slide. Our agriculture is not shrinking, it's just transforming. We've been so dependent on tobacco for so many years, and that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. And tobacco is still number one crop here in the area, and that's still a good thing. But we're actually getting some different infusions of different industries within the ag industry that are helping to strengthen our agriculture sector. Tobacco, is not, it's stabilizing, and then the value-added sector is becoming more important. R&D and agritourism. I mentioned the gentleman who has the big hay castle. That's a big draw. And when you can charge $8 a person, whoever comes in your driveway, tell you what, that makes making hay look pretty daggone worthwhile. Let's see here. We've talked about the economic numbers, and finally, the new initiatives that I talked about. Sky's the limit. With Pittsylvania County being the largest landmass county out here, we can do just about anything. We've got soil types that run the gamut right here. I mean, we've got, literally, you would not believe it, but we've got some black soil around here that's just as pretty as anything you'd see out west. But we also have the red clay that's as good for making tobacco to bricks to hops. So, I mean, it's all right here, and we just need to embrace all that. So that's really all that I have. I don't know what we're looking like on the time, but up 12:36, so we're doing good on time. I'll try to answer some questions. Don't know that I have a answer for you, but I'll try to answer some questions if anybody has anything. Yes, ma'am.
As far as the forestry industry, do you know any farmers that are trying to go globally and
Most of, other than the sawmills themselves, they're doing most of our farming families that have timber typically would rely on the sawmill to help market the products for them. There are some programs through the Department of Forestry where you can become a certified tree farm, things like that. But nobody that I know of, even myself, I don't have the time to go out and try to market to outside of the area. But, so that's why I'm relying on my contract with the timber harvester to market the product as best as he can. So. Right. And you bring up something else when you were mentioning, marketing kind of globally. That's something that I did not mention that's kind of interesting, too. For the last 3 years, believe it or not, there have been massive amounts. And when I say massive amounts, I mean hundreds, upwards of thousands of heifer cattle that are leaving this area going to Turkey. Believe it or not, Turkey is in demand for live animals that they can bring over there, put on the ground, that they can then breed, have meat products, have milk products, and things like that. And when you talk about taking cattle from this area to Baltimore to put them in quarantine, to put them on a gigantic ocean-going ship, I mean, it's quite impressive to see how they do that, and it's quite interesting. It's quite interesting. So we have a strong market with the turkey industry, and thanks to people like Todd Haymore who've helped out with that, getting that started. But we are marketing some of our products globally, so I wanted to mention that as well. Yes, sir. Uh-huh. I know that there is some concern, especially coming from my own household, my own bride, who says, wait a second, you're cutting down something that's taken 50, 60, 80, 100 years to grow. We have, through our Department of Forestry, very good statistics that indicate that we are actually replenishing our forest faster than them being harvested. It looks like that because with mechanization they can clear it so fast, but within the county and within the state, there's more being replenished than what's being harvested on an annual basis. Anybody else?
You had mentioned that I think we're 9th in the country in terms of production, and about 15th in terms of value.
Mm-hmm.
Does that owe to different types of tobacco grown in different counties, or are farmers getting more per acre, per ton?
Well, within Pittsylvania County, we are in the heart of what's known as the Old Belt. I don't know if anybody have heard that terminology before, but our Old Belt tobacco is grown in such a climate, our climate here, with the soil types that, it cannot be duplicated anywhere else in the world. It cannot be duplicated in Turkey. It cannot be duplicated in Brazil, anywhere. And so the flavor profiles that our tobacco, produces from the soil and from the climate that we have here are unmatched. And that's why you have companies like JTI and Altria and Philip Morris and RJR who have kind of utilized this area to solidify their tobacco needs. And then outside of that, then they'll go to these Turkish tobaccos, the Brazilian tobaccos, just to help blend in. So, their core is coming from right here. And, they're going to make it worthwhile for the farmer, to keep their core in production. So that's why we're still number 9 in the nation and 15th in value. Yep. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I might have missed it in your slide, but there's a company, a local company, that is proposing to, I don't know if they're actively doing it, growing tobacco for like biofuels, ethanol, those kind of things. How do you see that progressing?
With the ethanol trend that we're seeing here, there is the possibilities that are out there. I mean, you look at, with Verdia, that's right here, and you're looking at Piedmont Bioproducts. That's 2 companies within one county that wants to look at making ethanol or some type of a biofuel product. Yeah, and Titan's here too. So the excitement is here. People want to do some things with it. So it'll just be a matter of seeing how it plays out. There's always going to be, from what I feel like, that ethanol standard that the federal government has always set. It's how you get there that matters, whether it's going to be through corn ethanol or through some other byproduct. It's going to be out there, and as many people are playing with this market, somebody's bound to hit on something that will produce as much or at a more cost-effective measure than corn ethanol production.
And of course, you're not taking out the food supply.
That's correct. That's correct. So, yep. And I can tell you, from traveling the Midwest, Kansas, Oklahoma, and Texas, those plants, those ethanol plants, are extremely impressive. I mean, when you go by an area and all you can see for 25 or 30 acres is just this huge, massive plant, and I mean, you see train car loads of grain, and a train car consists of 100 rail cars of corn going into a facility. It makes you stop and think, oh my gosh, that's corn that we are not consuming in the traditional means. So it kind of, like, wow, okay, corn growers did a very good job of lobbying up in D.C., I can tell you that much. So they have stabilized their prices. Yep.